What are the paths to acquiring Lauri Markkanen for the Dallas Mavericks, and how would he fit alongside Kristaps Porzingis? This is the Gray Area right here on Kevin Gray Sports. My name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there. For all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube, you can catch me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers, 105.3 The Fan. Look, I'm not going to talk about Goran Dragic. You've heard me talk enough about Mr. Dragic, the current point guard, if you will, for the Toronto Raptors. We know how we feel about Goran Dragic and him wanting to be a Dallas Maverick. He has said as much. But this will focus on Lauri Markkanen. Now, Lauri Markkanen is a guy whose market during this offseason didn't necessarily materialize the way that he thought it would. The restricted free agent from Chicago, drafted back in 2017 as the number 7 overall pick, looking for a new home, desperate for a new home, and wants to find himself potentially on a team like the Dallas Mavericks. You've seen him tweet out and also on Instagram photos of Dirk Nowitzki's jersey, that he admires Dirk and loves Dirk and patterns his game, and has loved Dirk since being a kid. The Finnish star looking to potentially be a Dallas Maverick to follow in the footsteps of one of his favorite basketball players. But what does his fit look like with the Dallas Mavericks? Lauri Markkanen is a guy that could be a stretch 4 or a stretch 5, can shoot the ball well from the three-point line, shot a career high over 40% from the three-point line last year, but is a guy that doesn't necessarily create his own shot, will need others, secondary creators or primary creators, to be able to facilitate offense for him. And then we know what he is on the defensive end. Not necessarily great in terms of a defensive player in this league. So you say, Kevin, how in the world, number one, would he fit alongside Kristaps Porzingis? And two, what would it look like to try and facilitate a deal to try to even get him to be a Dallas Maverick? I thought Tim Cato did a really good job of summarizing what it would take for the Dallas Mavericks to try and acquire a guy in Lauri Markkanen. Now, here's what's interesting about Markkanen. Markkanen thought he would probably get around $14, $15 million on the open market and try to be able to move on, thinking that the Chicago Bulls may not necessarily match any offer that was given to him in free agency. That hasn't materialized at all for Markkanen, and that's a problem for him, because obviously with a desire to go elsewhere but a market not necessarily developing for him, his options then become limited, and he may have to make a decision, a business decision that is, to take less money to potentially go somewhere else. And that's where the Mavericks come in. Now, the Mavericks do have their trade exception of nearly $11 million still on the table after they moved Josh Richardson to the Boston Celtics and acquired that $11 million trade exception. So they could potentially use it on a guy in Markkanen. You could potentially get him to take a less deal from market value the way that he thought he was going to, and convince him that, one, he would be a high-level rotational player for this Mavericks team, and by taking less money, he can rehab his value to the point where he can get himself in position for a long-term deal down the road, or in another case, be able to find himself being a high-level rotational piece that gets his game and matches it alongside Luka Doncic. Now, defensively, as I mentioned, that's not necessarily going to be his forte, because if you acquire Markkanen, the idea is that he is going to be alongside Kristaps Porzingis potentially in a starting lineup. That is if Kristaps Porzingis can become the high-level defender and shot blocker and rim protector that we think he's capable of and we've seen flashes of at times. Because there won't be too much pressure on Markkanen to be a high-level rotational player playing at the salary of $11 million. Well, you say, Kevin, there's also other options. What if you do potentially like a sign and trade where Chicago, according to Tim Cato, has been interested in acquiring Maxi Kleber in a sign and trade where you send back $10, $11 million of offsetting salary. You offer Markkanen a deal of the 3-year, $45 million variety or somewhere close to there, and be able to try and sign him away and bring him to Dallas there while parting with either Maxi Kleber or a protected, heavily protected first-round pick. You say, Kevin, well, wait a minute now. I don't know if I necessarily want to part in terms of a draft pick and try to acquire Lauri Markkanen, who, yes, is 24 years old, has much higher upside on the offensive end, but I'd be sacrificing some things on the defensive end. Well, I say you probably should make that trade 100 times out of 100. I like Maxi Kleber. Maxi Kleber, going into his age 30 season, has turned himself into a good, serviceable NBA player whose defensive upside is much better than Lauri Markkanen. But the Dallas Mavericks don't necessarily value the draft and haven't valued the draft really over the past 10, 12 years, save for a couple of years, especially most recently in 2018 when they, of course, acquired and drafted Luka Doncic and won Jalen Brunson. So if you're concerned about giving away a protected first-round pick, you have to ask yourself, what would the Dallas Mavericks necessarily do with that first-round pick anyway if that's not the strategy that they're going to go down? Because the way that they've constructed their front office with Nico Harrison, they're going to continue to try and get free agents to come to Dallas and not maybe necessarily worry about what the NBA draft looks like in future years if you want to believe that Nico Harrison was brought in to be a potential closer when trying to acquire free agents going forward in the future. So if you feel that way and you don't necessarily care about the protected first-round pick being moved on, then maybe that's something that becomes more attractive to you in trying to get Lauri Markkanen to come to the Dallas Mavericks. If you are concerned about moving on from Maxi Kleber, you have to ask yourself this. How much are you willing to sacrifice for a guy in Markkanen who at 24 years of age has the upside to be able to be a really good offensive player who's going to flourish in this offense alongside Luka Doncic versus what you will probably see in a declining Maxi Kleber as time goes on, even with the defensive upside that he has? That's the kind of risk level reward that you're going to have to deal with when you're talking about acquiring Markkanen and potentially departing with one Maxi Kleber. So those things and more you would have to assume the Mavericks are thinking about. Now, the Mavericks should not let moving Maxi Kleber preclude them from getting Lauri Markkanen, because the opportunity to be able to have him in this offense, while yes, you're not going to be able to play a lick of defense if you're Lauri Markkanen in this Dallas Mavericks team, which honestly, though, what kind of real defense have they been playing the last few years anyway? This is not a team that's had a great defensive upside, even with the acquisitions of a guy, Josh Richardson, who didn't work out, a James Johnson didn't necessarily work out either. So if you're going to go down the strategy where you're going to have a coach, a Jason Kidd, who's going to be playing with pace and space and getting up and down the floor in terms of transition and playing with the kind of pace that you would want to see them score a lot of points with, maybe Markkanen is a better fit given the kind of ball movement and what you're going to be having in Luka Doncic still as your primary facilitator and ball handler as well as your primary scorer. If he's going to have to continue to carry the load in this way, you want to surround him with guys that can shoot the basketball, and they've started to do that, obviously, with the signings of Reggie Bullock and Sterling Brown. So if you decide to acquire Lauri Markkanen, you're kind of going down that same road for the Mavericks offensively. Again, this is all hinged on if Markkanen is going to be in your starting lineup alongside Kristaps Porzingis. Porzingis has to be the kind of defensive anchor that he's capable of being. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily work, and you're going to have to figure out how you make Markkanen a high-level rotational player if you're not going to play him alongside Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, that's going to be something that remains to be seen. But Markkanen is an appealing player who fits a lot of what the Mavericks can do from an offensive standpoint. He is going to have to prove that he can be a better defensive player in order to not get played off the floor when it comes to on the defensive side of the floor. And if he can do that, it may be beneficial for the Dallas Mavericks to be able to bring him into Dallas to pair alongside Kristaps Porzingis. Markkanen can also play as a stretch five also. So you have positional versatility with Markkanen at the 4 or the 5. But regardless, Mavericks fans want them to do something, whether that's acquire Goran Dragic or Lauri Markkanen or both. And if you do, how much better do you actually become? That's ultimately the question. I guess we'll find out. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. It's been another episode of The Gray Area. We'll talk to you later. Peace.